In this video, I'm going to talk about how this builder might be about to go broke and who could be next. Now imagine this, you've just woken up in a multi-million-dollar mansion. It's 6:30 a.m. and the sun is just peeking through the curtains. You're about to get up and go to work, driving a car worth over $100,000, and you've got a day full of meetings with your 60 employees. Then, there's a sudden knock on the door. It's the police and the Financial Markets Authority, and they're here to raid your house and take control of the development company you started almost 10 years ago, because things have gone horribly wrong. Well, that is exactly what happened to Kenyon Clark, a property developer who owns and, up until recently, controlled the Duval Group. So what went wrong? How do you go from driving a Rolls Royce and flying around in a private jet to losing control of your company? And which developers could be next? Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ed, an economist and property investor here at Opus Partners. And because I talk about property on the TV, the radio, and I write for the national newspapers, people often ask me, Ed, what do you think of this or that developer? Well, that's one of the reasons I recorded this video reviewing Duval properties almost 2 years ago. And in that video, I said there were just too many red flags, too many question marks for me to buy a property from Duval. If you are looking into a Duval property, keep your eyes open. Do your due diligence and carefully fact check, fact check, fact check. So what happened? Well, it looks like Duval was running out of money. You see, developers only get paid once they finish a house and the buyer actually pays them. So building the property itself, that is just an absolute money pit. You pay massive amounts to build the property and you don't get paid until the end. To pay these mounting costs, developers have to take out massive loans. And here's what kills developers. Every day that the property isn't finished is just another day that they've got to pay interest to the lender. So developers have to survive until you finish the properties and then they eventually get paid. But when your builders and your subbies are walking off site and they're stopping working because you haven't paid them, well, your properties stop getting built too. Then your project gets more and more behind and you now owe more and more interest back to the people you borrowed money off. And I recorded this episode of the Property Academy podcast over a year ago talking about whether Duval would go broke. And in that episode, I mentioned their Verge apartments. They started selling these back in April 2019, well over 5 years ago. Well, when the project still looks like this, you know there have been some insane delays. But wait, there's more. Duval were raising money from the public and they created a series of funds to invest the public's money. And they used a special legal loophole to do it. So they marketed their funds and promised a 10% return for some of them, but they marketed the funds to sophisticated wholesale investors only. Now, this meant they didn't have to follow the same strict processes that a normal company would usually have to when raising money. That wouldn't usually be an issue, but there are allegations that the sophisticated investors they were taking money from weren't that sophisticated after all and might not have met the legal criteria. That's not just unethical, if true, it's illegal. And if you do that, the FMA may just come knocking at your door and put a bunch of accountants in charge of your company. But is Duval just the first domino to fall? Could this be a sign that other property developers are shaky too? After all, Duval seemed like a big player, and it's a tough time in New Zealand's construction sector. Building consents, they've plummeted, and other developers have similar funds to Duval and have even been wrapped over the knuckles by the FMA too. But was Duval as big as they seemed? Although Kenyon Clark, the company's founder, had a massive Instagram following and a larger-than-life personality sponsoring the Auckland Blues rugby team and showing off a lavish lifestyle, Duval was actually a pretty small developer. They only consented 101 units in 2020, none in 2021, none in 2022, and only 58 last year in 2023. Over the same period, Mike Greer Homes, they consented 18.6 times that number. Williams Corporation, they consented 13 times the properties that Duval did. Now, if Mike Greer fell over, that would be massive. And I'm in no way suggesting that Mike Greer will fall over. I'm just using them as an example of a company that is actually big. The truth is that Duval was pretty small. Just because a developer has lots of followers on Instagram, that doesn't mean that they are building lots and lots of properties. So their downfall likely won't impact other developers much, maybe a slight loss of confidence from buyers, but the big impact That's actually on the people who worked with, invested with, and bought properties from Duval. Think about the builders, the plumbers, the electricians, people who worked on their sites. Some of those small business owners are owed between $500,000 and up to $1 million. Now, if these guys don't get paid, their small businesses could shut down. There are also risks for anyone who bought a property from Duval. Imagine that you're a first home buyer and you bought one of those apartments back in 2019. You were all excited. You signed a contract to buy an apartment, your first home, and you paid the deposit while you waited for the property to be built. But 5 years later, you're still waiting. Well, the good news is that you should get your deposit back if the apartment block never finishes, but houses are more expensive in 2024 compared to 2019. So you get your deposit back, but you might not be able to use it to buy a house today. And you still had to pay rent for the last 5 years, putting your life on hold until the property was finished. And I want to be clear, I actually don't have an issue with developers being successful. I don't have an issue with people with big personalities, or if they fly around in private jets, or even if they're a bit flashy on social media. That's not my problem. But I do have a problem if that is at the expense of regular Kiwis, mum and dad investors, and first home buyers, because that's who this YouTube channel is for. And if you like learning about property in this really honest way, I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe. I'm trying to grow the channel to 20,000 subscribers. And if you do already subscribe, you might be wondering who will be the next developer to fall. Well, over the last few years, I've released a list of developers I recommend and the ones that I don't. The link for this is down in the description. And if we look at who I don't recommend, we've got Reed Myers, they're in liquidation. Crawford Developments, they're in liquidation too. We've got Black Robin, they're not in liquidation, but they're in receivership similar to Duval. And these three developers were all on my do not recommend list well before they went bust. Now, not everyone is on this list because of financial troubles. Some, like Fletcher Living, are big, stable companies, but I just don't think they build the best investment properties, so I don't recommend them. But I put this list together because my company, Opus Partners, we help regular Kiwis grow their wealth, and we do it by helping you find good new build investment properties from good developers. And through that, we've learned that you really need to work with developers who are of good character, people who are more interested in building good houses than posting about their latest private jet ride on social media. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of the next developers to fall over is on this list.